Hello again. We are continuing our discussion of polynomials by talking about how to divide them. We've talked about adding, subtracting, and multiplying, and now we're going to divide polynomials. All right, we need to talk about how to do long division with numbers, and I know that was a while ago, so I'll go through an example of that with you because the steps are essentially the same, and you need to know what those steps are and why you're doing them so that we can talk more easily about dividing polynomials. If I have 5,491 and I'm dividing it by 26, what I do is I look at that 26 and I ask myself, how many times does 26 go into the first little chunk of that number, which is 54? And the answer is twice. So what do I do with that 2 after I've written it down on top? I multiply that 2 by the 26 that's on the outside, and I get 52. Okay? What do I do with that 52 and the 54 that's above it? I subtract those. So 54 minus 22 or minus 52 is going to give me 2. What do I do now? Well, I bring down the next digit, which is a 9, and I go through the process again until I run out of digits. So I ask myself, how many times does that 26 on the outside go into the 29 that I just wrote down? Well, that's once. What is 26 times 1? It's 26, and I write that underneath. And then I figure out what is 29 minus 26, and that's 3. So once that's done, I bring down the next digit, which is a 1. And I ask myself the same questions. How many times does 26 go into 31? Once. What is 1 times 26? It's 26. And then I subtract, and I get 5. Okay? Well, I've run out of digits and I have a remainder, so what do I do with that remainder? I write the remainder over what I was dividing by, which is the 26. So my answer is not actually 211 because there's a little bit left over. My answer is 211 and 5/26. Okay? So remember those steps because now we're going to have to divide polynomials. For example, if I needed to divide 5x to the third plus 4x squared plus 9x plus 1 divided by x plus 6. Well, the first thing I ask myself is, how much does that x on the outside go into the first term on the inside, which is 5x to the third? Okay, so what would I have to multiply x by to get 5x to the third? Well, I'd have to multiply it by 5x squared, and I've written that above the line. And remember what I do once I write something above the line, I multiply it by whatever's on the outside. So I'm going to take that 5x squared and I'm going to multiply it by the x and by the 6. And I'm going to write it underneath. Well, 5x squared times x is 5x to the third, and 5x squared times 6 is 30x squared, and I write that underneath. What do I do after I write something underneath? I subtract. So I'm going to do 5x to the third plus 4x squared minus what I just wrote down, 5x to the third plus 30x squared. And if I do that, 5x to the third minus 5x to the third is going to be nothing, but 4x squared minus positive 30x squared is going to give me negative 26x squared. Okay, so that part's done. What do I do next after I subtract? I bring down the next term, which is a positive 9x, and I go through the same process. So I'm looking at the x on the outside, and I'm looking at the negative 26x squared underneath, and I ask myself, what would I have to multiply x by to get negative 26x squared? And the answer is negative 26x, okay? And I write that on top. What would I do after I write that on top? I multiply that by whatever's on the outside. So negative 26x times x is going to be negative 26x squared. Negative 26x times the 6 is going to be negative 156x. And I write that underneath. And then just like before, I subtract. And negative 26x squared minus negative 26x squared is nothing, and 9x minus negative 156x, remember your rules for double negatives, would give you 165x. So that part's done. I have one last term to bring down, and that's the plus 1. And again, one last time I ask myself, what would I have to multiply that x by on the outside to get 165x? And the answer is 165. So I multiply 165 by everything that's on the outside, and I get 165 times x is 165x, and 165 times 6 is 990. So that's what I write underneath. And then I subtract, 165x minus 165x is going to be nothing, and 1 minus 990 is going to give me negative 989. And so I've run out of terms. I do have a remainder. So just like I did with numbers, I have to write that remainder over what I was dividing by, which was x plus 6. So my answer is not 5x squared minus 26x plus 165. It's all of that plus this fraction right here, negative 989 over x plus 6. All right, and that's how you divide polynomials. One last example just so that you're comfortable with it. If I have x to the third minus 7x squared plus 5x minus 4, and I'm dividing by x minus 2, I look at the x that's at the beginning of the outside and the x to the third that's at the beginning of the inside, and I ask myself, what would I have to multiply x by to get x to the third? And that would be x squared. So I take that x squared and I multiply it by everything that's outside, the x and the minus 2, and I get x to the third minus 2x squared. All right, and I write that underneath. Then I subtract. X cubed minus x cubed is nothing. Negative 7x squared minus negative 2x squared is going to give me negative 5x squared. So that part's done, and I bring down the next term, which is plus 5x. So again, I look at the x on the outside and the negative 5x squared. What would I have to multiply x by to get negative 5x squared? Negative 5x. So I take that negative 5x and multiply it by everything that's outside, and I get negative 5x squared plus 10x. Once that's written down, I subtract it. Negative 5x squared minus negative 5x squared is nothing, and 5x minus 10x is negative 5x. Bring down the last term, which is a negative 4. Look at the x, look at the negative 5x. What would I multiply x by to get negative 5x? That's negative 5. So I multiply everything on the outside by negative 5, and I get negative 5x plus 10. Then I subtract. Negative 5x minus negative 5x is nothing, and negative 4 minus 10 is going to give me negative 14. So I'm done. My answer is not x squared minus 5x minus 5, because remember, I have to put that remainder over what I was dividing by. So I have one little fraction at the end of my answer to make it complete, and that fraction is going to be negative 14 over x minus 2. So that is how you divide polynomials. We're probably going to need quite a bit of practice to get good at this, but we'll do that tomorrow. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you tomorrow.